So tonight we're going to be talking to Antony Johnston. He's a New York Times best-selling writer and he's a podcaster. The Charlize Theron movie Atomic Blonde is based on his graphic novel, Brigitte Sharp. Graphic novel. And his Brigitte Sharp thrillers are also very critically acclaimed. Dead Space, his first video game, redefined its genre, and he hosts the podcast Writing and Breathing. It's always good to keep breathing, definitely. Antony's books, graphic novels, and video games include the Exphoria Code, the Tempest Project, Daredevil, Shang-Chi, Shadow of Mordor, and the Alex Rider graphic novels, the adaptation of Alan Moore's lost screenplay, Fashion Beast, and more. And how does he stay so productive? Well, we're going to find out why, or how actually, because his new book, which is The Organised Writer, has just come out. And
Look at all those marks.
Yes, I'm very organized. They're messy, but they're organized. Yes, and so I just read that book and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I have to say, Antony, I consider myself pretty organized. I teach writing and I teach a lot of things in this book, but even so, I learned quite a few things from your book and I'm really, really impressed with it. I highly recommend it, and not just
wonderful.
Doing this. I'd like to ask you a few questions and interview you about, I'm going to be interviewing Antony about The Organized Writer. And then Luke is going to take over and interview Antony about some of his other work as well. So Here we go. So I read tons and tons of these, but you are very specific about a lot of different things. One of my favorite things is at the very beginning, you talk about the clear mind. Can you describe what that is and how one approaches the writing desk with a clear mind?
Clean mind, specifically.
Clean mind, sorry, yeah. Clean mind. I can't read but I'm organized.
No, clean mind theory is my name for being able to, as you say, approach your writing desk to begin writing without the distractions of the real world occupying your mind and distracting you from the work. And the best way the easiest way, I should say, to achieve this is to write as soon as you get up in the morning. I mean, obviously, walk your dogs, take your kids to school, that sort of thing, but don't check your email, don't open your physical mail even. Do as little as you can to engage with the outside world before you sit down to begin writing, because then you will have less distractions while you're doing so, and your imagination can run wild without being, as I say, distracted, and without thinking in the back of your mind about an email that you want to reply to, or something that made you angry on Twitter, as most things on Twitter do these days. And so it's all about getting those distractions out of the way so that there's nothing between you and the work for as long as possible.
Right.
And it's not possible to sustain that for, hours and hours all day, obviously, but that's why I recommend doing it first thing in the morning, so that you're at your most productive and you're least distracted.
Right. But clean mind is not just what happens right before writing, but also, of course, what happens during the hours that you are writing. So, I mean, most of us, of course, have developed some kind of optimum system for ourselves. Like some write to music, some write no music, some write with, binaural sound effects, some write with, white noise, variety of things. So it's about kind of controlling your environment then, isn't it? To keep this mind in that shape.
To an extent, yeah. I mean, as you say, there are as many ways to work and as many productive environments as there are writers. Everybody is different. Everybody, certainly people in our position, people who've been doing it for many years, we know what works for us in terms of an environment in which we can work and be productive.
Yes, I like that about your book. You're very open in terms of you're not saying this is the one way.
Absolutely, yeah. No, because I know from my own experience that's you can't be prescriptive like that.
Right.
Yeah, the old joke is there are 10 writers for an opinion and you'll get 11 back.
Right. Somebody snuck in too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So again, it is all about rejecting distraction. And so the idea of the maintaining the clean mind throughout the day is to have this environment, as you say, in which you're comfortable working, in which you know you can get stuff done, and then making sure that it's not interrupted, it's not corrupted again by the outside world. So, for example, we all have phones these days. My phone, everybody's phone has a do not disturb function. Most people have that. I mean, it automatically on most phones comes on during the night, and most people just leave it at that, or they might have it set from, say, 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. or something. I have mine set from 10 p.m. through to 1 p.m. the next day.
Right.
So that while I'm writing in the mornings, because that's my writing time, when I'm working, I will not take any phone calls. I will not see any text messages. I will get no notifications. That phone will not disturb me. It just sits here on my desk and charges. It's not being a phone at that time. And that is such a simple thing, but it can make such a huge difference.
I agree. I totally agree. And yes, so many of us are not quite willing to do that cutoff, and yet we need to. We really do need to.
As I say in the book, we're writers, not brain surgeons. You know, I mean, how many calls do we really get that must be answered, you know, immediately, or that can't wait a couple of hours? It's really rare.
I love this sentence. So that you're talking about external interruptions, but what about internal ones? I really like this sentence of yours. Memory distraction is sabotage from within. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what is Miller's Law and the magical number of 7.
So Miller's Law refers to a psychological study done by Dr. Miller many years ago about how human memory works. And again, as I say in the book, as with almost everything to do with human cognition, it's really difficult to pin this down to exact science and exact numbers, almost impossible. But the general consensus around Miller's work seems to be that humans can hold about 7 things in our memory at any one time.
Right.
So if you go shopping for 7 items, and then on the way there, you suddenly remember that you need something else, there is a good chance you will forget one of the other items if you don't have it written down in a list. And the same thing is true of, you know, not just items to shop, but just things we have to do, tasks we have to remember to carry out, chores that are due, appointments that we have. And so, again, this word distraction keeps coming up. Memory distraction is when you are so busy trying to remember all the things you have to do, all the chores you have to do, all the tasks you must carry out, all the appointments you must keep, that you're constantly rehearsing them. The term for it is memory rehearsal, item rehearsal. You're rehearsing these items, this list in your mind so much that, because if you fear that if you don't, you'll forget them all, and that is a very real risk. But the rehearsal prevents you from committing 100% of your mind to your work.
Yes, it removes cycles. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so a lot of the book and a lot of the system is about getting these things out of your mind and into a system, whether that is on your computer or in, you know, a notepad or whatever, where you trust that you will see it when you need to and that it won't be forgotten. So you don't worry, oh, if I don't keep thinking about this thing, I'm going to forget it. You can stop having those worries and instead trust that they're in some kind of a system, and therefore, again, allow you to commit 100% to the work without worrying that you're losing things. We already have to remember so much when we're writing. Think about, whether it's fiction writers, think about all the things that we have to remember just to write a paragraph, you know, the next paragraph in our draft. The last thing we want to be doing is also trying to remember that we have to go and pick up a pint of milk.
Right, exactly, yes. Yes, so I think that's a really excellent piece of advice. And I like, you know, I read your book, and you have various strategies for capturing these elusive things that want to come in and rob our working brain while we're trying to write. And you have a variety of strategies. Your strategies are unusual. I've read a lot of books on organization, and as I said, I've written some stuff about this. But yours are kind of unusual. And one of the features that's so unusual, I think, is that you have one notebook. Can you talk about the one notebook and how you use it?
So I I'm always surprised that this is unusual. Yes, this is my notebook. This is my current notebook, and it currently says, you probably can't read that, but it says January 22, and I haven't, obviously when I finish it, I'll put the date on there. I have all my archive notebooks on my shelf with all the dates written on the spines. The idea of having more than one notebook seems like madness to me. And I know people who have one notebook per project, and I'm like, but then what happens if you have an idea for a new project? Where do you put the thoughts that you have about that new project? Where does that go? Do you have another notebook for things that aren't yet projects? And if so, why not just use that notebook for those projects as well? So that's what I do. I use one notebook for all my projects. In fact, I'll open this up and I'll show you. So just the last couple of days, I have been making notes on 2 different projects. And so you can see here, these horizontal lines, and what those are is separators between the things that I'm making notes about. So here are, notice the dog-eared corner there as well. That's to remind me that I haven't transcribed it yet. So when I go to make a note, I dog-ear the corner, I make the note. Then when I'm finished, I put a line under it. And then the next set of notes here are about a completely different project. I just title it, put the notes down. And again, when I get to the end of that note, just roll a line under it, and the next notes are about another different project, and so on and so on. The dog ears, as I say, are there just to remind me that I haven't yet transcribed
Talk
those
about
notes.
transcribing, because that is an unusual technique in my view. I hadn't seen it described in that way before. So what do you have this notebook, and you have all these little sections, ideas for this, ideas for that. So now what do you do next?
The transcribing part, I know is unusual. And that is just my own idiosyncrasy. I am a rewriter, an inveterate rewriter and an outliner. And I know not everybody is, and I acknowledge this in the book, but that is the way that I work. And what I've found is that when I'm transcribing my notes, I take those notes and then I will have separate projects, obviously on my computer for different, manuscripts, books and what have you. And I will take the notes from a certain project and I will transcribe them into the notes section of that particular document or project on the computer. But while I'm doing it, inevitably, what I'm transcribing will spark further thoughts about the same project. Right. I'll be transcribing something and think, oh, actually, that makes me think, what if this, what if that? And I'll have new ideas. And those I put in as part of the transcription. I just type those out as I'm having those thoughts. But again, I can do that because I'm not at risk. There's no risk of me doing that, making me forget the original notes I made because they're written down in a notebook. So I can go off on these flights of fancy and these tangents inspired by the stuff that I'm transcribing, the notes I've already made. And then
do you also type those in?
Yeah, I'm typing everything, yeah.
Okay.
But then once I've gone down that particular path and sort of exhausted that tangent, then I can come back to the original notes and get back to, whatever point I was at and start transcribing again. But I find that every time I do that, every time I transcribe notes, I will have more ideas about something. And so that's why I do it. That's one of the reasons why I like to make notes longhand first and then transcribe them in the computer, because what I find is that when I put them in the computer straight away, if I'm not going through the act of transcribing, I just don't have those same sparks of new thoughts and ideas.
Right. Okay. Well, it's interesting. So for some people, the notion of writing down notes and then typing them in seems like double work, but you've made a very good point that it isn't, because it's not just straight transcription. You do transcribe. I assume you type really fast, right? Am I right?
I'm a touch typist. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's not only that, but it's a jumping off point for further work, and it cements the ideas as well as provides a springboard at the same time.
Exactly. It's no more double work than you're rewriting the draft of a manuscript is.
Right, right. And writing, as we all know, yes, writing is rewriting.
Yeah, exactly.
You have a wonderful acronym in your book, FASTEN, filing, assistance, say no, time, equipment, and notes. And you put that in fairly early in the book. Would you like to talk about fasten a little bit?
Sure. I won't go into too much depth because it will take me an hour to.
Right. No, but just sort of a summary of what that means.
Filing is about filing things so that you can always find them and you never need to think about where to put them. You know, having a filing system that just is almost completely thoughtless. And I do that by just everything's alphabetical.
Yes, I want to talk to you about your filing system separately because it's an interesting notion. But so what's, just going through these.
And then assistance is delegating things to like agents, lawyers, accountants, tasks for which you are not the best suited person to handle them. Say no is about the value of saying no and protecting your time and not saying yes to every single offer that you get. Obviously, I go into a lot more detail about the circumstances around which that revolves in the book. If you're struggling for work, of course you should say yes. Time is about time management and using your calendar to good effect. Equipment is about buying the right equipment, or using the right equipment, I should say, and investing in good tools that, again, you don't have to think about when you're using. And then notes is what we were just talking about, the value of taking notes and how to take notes effectively for your work.
So what's interesting is that you, in your book, you touch on all of these and you go into detail about them. You describe your particular system and why it works. But I really do appreciate that you in this writing, you do know that everybody doesn't work the same, and et cetera. There's one area where people vary greatly, and it has a great deal to do with their circumstances. And that is whether when you sit down to do a writing session and be productive, how do you define that productivity? In other words, do you write to time or do you write to word count, being the essential question?
Yeah, so that's probably the area that went through the most revisions during the editorial process of the book, because my original draft was a lot more militant than
right. Yes.
Than the final result. The editors were quite insistent that I should tone things down a little bit. If you are in a position to do so, I always urge people to write to a word count every day, regardless of what that word count is. Again, for veteran writers like us, we know what a comfortable word count is. We know from experience how many words we can bang out in a day comfortably, sometimes not so comfortably, but that we can still do, even if we're struggling. My personal count is 1,500 words a day. Even if I'm struggling, we all have those days when the words aren't flowing. I can still get to 1,500 words. If the words are flowing, sure, I might make 3,000, 4,000 words. That's brilliant. But my minimum is 1,500. And I do that for however long it takes.
Right. Yes.
Rather than saying I'm going to write for 2 hours, I say I'm going to write 1,500 words. Now, that might only take me 2 hours. It might take me 4 hours. However long it takes, that's my word count. Part of the reason I do that is because it makes figuring out deadlines and the time I'll need to achieve a deadline much easier for me to manage. But as you say, not everybody's in that position. And so what I normally advocate for people who can't regularly find a solid block of time every day,
or an open-ended block,
or just a block long enough that it might as well be open-ended for the purposes of hitting their word count, is to not necessarily reverse it, but to still make it a routine, and to say, okay, I can only spare an hour a day, but I know I can spare this hour every day. And so make that the routine. Commit to spending that hour every day writing. And then I try to encourage people to give themselves a small word count, because my belief is that even saying like 200 words, which is, it's 200 words to somebody who writes regularly, that's nothing, but it's still a target. It still forces you to sit there and write and, type the keyboard and put the words one in front of the other. Now, any good writer in an hour will almost certainly write more than 200 words. But the mere fact that you do that and that you surpass the target that you've set yourself will give you the same good feeling
Yes.
as I get from writing 1,500 words every day, no matter how long it takes. And then I know I've done enough. I know at that point I've done enough for the day, and I can carry on if I'm feeling good. But if I'm not, I can stop, do other things, and not feel bad about it, because that's...
There's another good fallout, I think, from working to word count, no matter what. And that is that it sort of forces you to shut down the critic. I mean, this is something that, all writers battle, but when you're working to word count, it's so obviously in the way that you really have to shut it down. And I think that's the psychology behind NaNoWriMo, which is, I think, 1,648 or something words per day in order to make the deadline. And I think a lot of people who have tried a nano have made it, have discovered that in order to get that reliable, and that's an amount pretty close to what you've said. Actually, that's my amount also per day, same as yours. And so to get that reliably, you just have to shut down that critic, and I feel like that's building muscle. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big believer in NaNoWriMo. A friend of mine used to be on the board, and I support it wholeheartedly, because I'm a big believer that writing more makes you a better writer.
Yes, I agree.
That writing is a question of practice, like any other skill. There's a big argument, obviously, of sort of talent versus skill in any creative art. I'm one of those people who believes that talent is necessary but not sufficient to have a career.
Yes, you don't even sometimes know if you have talent until you've done the work.
Yes. You can have, you can write a book. If you're talented, you can write a book. But you need skill and practice to write 10 books and make a career out of it. And, I am assuming that that's the aim of most people, certainly who are reading the Organised Writer, is that they want to make a living from it. The other thing I think that's important to, just to circle back to the previous question, that's important to state is that as writers, we're really good at beating ourselves up. We're really good at not feeling good about what we do. And so that's why I, again, encourage everyone to set themselves achievable targets, just in terms of the writing, in terms of your word count, because it sounds silly because you're doing it, you're consciously doing it, and so you think, well, I'm not going to feel good about myself because I know I've given myself a really easy target to hit. But you still will feel good about yourself. It's a crazy little psychological trick that you play on yourself, but it works.
Yes, exactly. And so, yes, I think you recommended, like, if you're really you're stumbling and you just can't make yourself to pick like 200 words, a day, you said, and just reliably do that for a few days, and you build strength, you build courage from that, I think, and start to believe in yourself. Your book is divided into sections. So the first part is sort of preparing and whatever, and the second part is writing, and then the third part is sort of the organizing of the stuff, of all the stuff around it. And I think those three sections themselves are really good. Let's talk about the writing section for a minute. You've already talked about how many words you aim for in a day. A commonly recommended technique is sprints or pomodoros. And for those who don't know what that is, that's setting a timer for an amount. Usually it's 20 minutes, sometimes 25 minutes, then take a 5 to a 10-minute break, and then you keep repeating these cycles. And this was, I believe, originally based on a military theory of people that had to march very, very long miles. And what they did is they found that if they had the soldiers stop before they were tired, take a little rest, and then keep going, they could go much farther, much faster. But on the other hand, that seems to interrupt the flow. And I'm going to talk about Csikszentmihalyi in a few minutes, because he's one of my favorites also, and you've mentioned him in your book. But let's talk about sprints and pomodoros and how you feel about writing in that technique.
I'm not a fan of them.
Right.
Put frankly, I know people I have friends who write in sprints, mostly screenwriters. Actually, most of the people I know who use sprints are screenwriters, and I think that it lends itself the method lends itself more to that kind of relatively short form writing, where you're, it's, as a screenwriter, I write screenplays myself, so I know it's fairly easy to write a scene in half an hour if you know how you're approaching it, if you've got your outline. But can a novelist write a chapter in half an hour? That's a lot more rare. I mean, I'm not going to say it can't be done, but it's a lot more difficult.
Unless you write short chapters.
The idea that you would voluntarily interrupt yourself as you're, when you're in a state of flow, just strikes me as madness. Like I say, I have friends who do it, and it works for them. And this is something I say repeatedly in the book: if something is already working for you, don't change it. Don't use my method if your method is already working. Look for other things in the book that will help you. Don't change the things that are already going well for you. But for me, the idea of sprints for long form work, as I say, for novels, just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yes, because I agree with you on that, and I liked the idea of it. I've experimented with it, but it doesn't really work. I'm also a screenwriter. That was my initial as a writer. That's what I did initially, and I agree with you. You can write a scene frequently in that amount of time, but novels take longer thinking. So let's talk a minute about flow. Probably most of you here have heard of the notion of flow. This was sort of described originally by a man named, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but his last name is pronounced Csikszentmihalyi. It looks like Csikszentmihalyi, but anyway, it's Csikszentmihalyi.
I had to look up how to pronounce that when I recorded the narration for the audio, when I did the narration for the audio.
I've met him. He's in California, actually.
Oh, right.
Where I'm from. Yeah, so he's a fantastic man who basically just described this particular state in which the task you have set for yourself is neither too hard nor too easy, but exactly the level of difficulty that makes you try really hard, but allows you the ability to get there. And that level of difficulty is something that you set for yourself. It can be like from time, like I've got to hit these, 1,500 words, or whatever it is that you're aiming for. And so let's talk a little bit about how you find flow when you're writing. What is it that causes or puts you in a state of flow?
That's really hard to define. I mean, I think it's, as you say, something needs to be it can't be something that you know exactly how to do, because then you will get bored by it.
Bored. Yes, if it's too easy, you're bored.
Yeah.
Too hard, you get frustrated.
Right. Yeah. But as you say, if it's too difficult, and we all know this feeling, I'm sure, God knows, when it's too difficult, your brain switches off just as easily, because you just go, oh my God, I can't possibly even get my head around this. Yeah. So yeah, you're right about the difficulty level needs to be just right. And that's very, very hard to impose upon yourself. Which is one of the reasons why, when you do get into a state of flow, the last thing personally I want to do is interrupt it, because it doesn't come that often. When it does happen, it's wonderful. Those are the days when I hit 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words, and I look up from my keyboard and it's dark all of a sudden. And, those are wonderful days when you lose them to the writing. They don't come very often. So, but yeah, they do come when you're in that state of flow.
So some people call that the muse, summoning the muse, and the muse is on your shoulder and working with you or for you. But we have to sort of find a way to summon the muse, even when we can't see her in the room.
I don't like the muse. I believe
you don't like the term the muse, right?
The modern concept of the artistic muse, I think, is pernicious and damaging and a terrible, terrible thing for artists to succumb to. Now, again, if it works for you, I'm not going to argue.
Actually, I don't use that word myself, but when you describe the state of flow,
well, that's the thing. I think it's much more.
Yeah, that is the thing where it's outside of you. It feels outside of you.
Right.
For me, it doesn't. The sensation is that this is just coming in, And
Right.
I'm just the vehicle for this.
But
So
exactly.
I don't call it the muse myself either, but it is. But some people do. It's this feeling of you're not in the way.
Right. And that's why I think it's much more valuable to recognize that it's not coming from outside and that it is something that you induce in yourself by good preparation, having a clean mind, being in the flow of the work. And it is something that, like I say, you know, it doesn't happen that often, but it is something that you can make more likely by
Yes.
preparing the way for yourself. You know, it's like the old saying about good luck comes to those who work hard, you know, comes dressed in overalls or whatever the saying goes. And I think the muse, so-called, is the same thing.
Right, it's you.
That it actually, if you prepare the ground well enough, you will reach that state of flow more often.
The muse is in here. The muse is in here, but you have to just open the channels, basically.
Right. But the other reason I don't
distractions.
The other reason I don't like using the word muse and talking about it in those terms is because that's also the root of people who think they have writer's block, or you know, who sort of despair that, like, oh, I'm not inspired, so I can't write. And I think that does writers a disservice, does yourself a disservice if you think that, if you think you must be inspired in order to produce good work, rather than understand all art, even capital A art, is iterative. It all went through a process of roughs, and then first draft, and then final polish, and all that. All art went through that process. If you understand and acknowledge that, rather than thinking that it came to somebody like divine inspiration,
like a bolt of lightning,
then you will increase the chances that you produce that work yourself, and you'll be able to appreciate your own contribution to that art better.
I love that sentence, Anthony. All art is iterative.
It
really is. It doesn't just come out the first time perfectly, and
it does not spring fully formed from our heads.
No. Yes, exactly. But I think that's a brilliant sentence there. So how are we doing on time, Luke? How much more time do we have on this, do you think? Are you around?
I mean, I can go all night.
It's 8:19. I mean, keep going if you want. I have nowhere to be.
Nowhere to go. Okay. So I don't see really any questions in the chat. But anyway, I'll come back to that. I wanted to reiterate to people.
To be fair, I don't think you invited them. So
we didn't.
If people want to ask questions, type them in the chat.
Yeah, put them in the chat and we'll go through them.
In the chat. And you can go back to things we've already talked about as well. I mean, you have to. Let's see. Sprint and interval. Let's see. Oh, okay. I love this one. 5 pages after breakfast. So why after breakfast?
Well, that's what we talked about earlier. That's the concept of the clean mind and having more energy first thing in the morning.
Before the day crowds in, the rest of the day. Exactly. So you're definitely a morning writer. What if I'm not a morning person? What if I can't wake up very well? How do I keep my mind clean and still get some stuff out of the way till I wake up?
But I'm not a morning person. That's the thing. I'm really not. I never have been. But that doesn't alter the fact that I have more energy, especially at this, these days, none of us are getting any younger. I have much more energy after I've just woken up than I do just before I go to sleep. When I was younger, I was one of those people who would stay up writing until 2, 3 a.m., no problem, and regularly did. And I just can't do that anymore. And so that's why I switched and made a clean sort of break, as it were, to focusing on writing first thing in the morning instead. And what I found immediately was that I was much more productive because of the clean mind, but also just because I was writing when I had the most energy. Writing is tiring.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not digging ditches, of course not, but it is tiring. It is mentally exhausting. And so, again, as I say, as we all get older, I think we stand a much better chance of getting more work done and being more productive if we work first thing in the morning. And to younger writers, I say, if you want to make this a career, if you want to be a writer for the rest of your life, it's a good idea to get into these good habits now so that you are already in that state of mind. You already have this habit ingrained in you as you get older, and your energy levels start to drop and your memory starts to go, and all these problems that we face.
Right. Well, I totally agree with you. I think of writing as almost a physical sport. I mean, it's something that you need to kind of train for, and you need to listen to your body and your mind to hone it for your sport. What your sport requires, whether it's stamina or it's, whether you need the fast twitch muscle or the marathoner's muscle. Writers kind of need both mentally. And it's like, how do you nurture that in yourself what kinds of health advice do you have for writers who want to maximize the number of hours in a day that they have a clean mind and the energy to be productive?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, and, nobody should take anything that I say as medical or dietary advice. That said, try and get a good night's sleep, go to bed when your body tells you to, rather than forcing yourself to stay awake. If you are able to, don't set yourself an alarm in the morning. Get into let your body get into the habit of waking up when it feels comfortable. I don't set an alarm, but I still wake up within the same 10 to 15 minute period every single morning. I just, that's the habit that my body's gotten into. Try and eat well. Not too much sugar, not too much processed food. Try and cook for yourself whenever you can. That's the other thing. My partner and I take it in turns to cook each night, and I actually, we both enjoy cooking, and it's one of the things that I look forward to, because it's one of the few things I do in my day that isn't related to work and can't be monetized. Even if I wanted to, it's not like I could try to make money from it. And obviously, plus I just, I also have certain dietary restrictions. So I have to cook for myself, but I also enjoy doing it because I can make sure that I'm eating, like tasty food that's also good for me. Just try and take care of yourself. Normally I'd say go to the gym. Of course, at the moment we're all in lockdown and we can't go to the gym. But get some exercise, get outdoors, go for a walk.
What about having a regular, what did Flaubert say? You quoted Flaubert about being regular and orderly and regular, or something like that?
That's the quote that opens the book. Yes, be regular and orderly in your life so that you may be violent and original in your work.
Yes, I agree with that, don't you? It's really, really...
I wouldn't have put it at the start of the book if I didn't.
Yeah, it's really, I think, excellent advice. I'm not a big believer in the tortured artist. I think that a person that wants to create art, as you said, it's iterative and it's a long haul. It's the marathon. So
right.
Take care of it.
It is, as I say, if you want to make a career of it, yes, you can create one or two wonderful pieces of art probably in your life if you're not disciplined, if you're not regular, and if you just rely on inspiration. I'm not saying that you'll never do anything relying on that, but trying to make a living, especially in the modern age, as a creative artist without making it a regular habit and without being organized, without having some kind of discipline, is extremely difficult. And you are only making it harder for yourself. There are people who, I've talked about this before, there are people who believe that if you try to impose too much order on the creative process, or if you think too much about how your own creative process works, that you're robbing yourself of inspiration. But what I found is the opposite. And I was like that for a while, but then one of my heroes, creative heroes, Brian Eno, I read an interview with him where he said that he had also believed that for a while, but then he decided to try, when he was in his 40s, he decided to finally really examine his own creative process. And what he found was that he had more ideas than he knew what to do with. And I found the same, it's examining how I work and being disciplined about how I apply my imagination to my work has actually, if anything, increased my creativity. It certainly hasn't diminished it.
So my husband is a scientist, and he says that generating a lot of ideas is not the hard part, but picking the really good ones out is the hard
Yes.
part.
Yeah, absolutely true. Yes, yes. And the way that you do that is through experience, and again through practice, and
Right.
doing it again and again and again. And there is no substitute for experience in the creative arts, I think. You know,
It means work a
you
lot.
lose energy as
Mhm.
you gain experience. I look back at my first books and I think, like, my God, you know, I could never write those books now because I don't have that sort of madcap energy that I did when I was in my 20s. But what I do, I also read them and go, my God, that's a terrible sentence. I can't believe I wrote that. What I do have is, you know, that experience that I know I'm a better writer now, and I may not have that sort of young Turk energy that I had then, but I know that I produce better art regardless.
Um, I would just like to end this with a couple of questions about the tools that you use. Like you, I'm a huge fan of Scrivener, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you like about that program, and any other sort of things you'd like to talk about in terms of the tools that you
Sure.
have come to rely on.
Yeah, Scrivener, I absolutely rely on. I literally use it every day. And I write, excuse me, as you alluded to at the start, you know, yes, I write novels, but I also write video games and screenplays and short stories. And I do, you know, write essays and I give talks and all that sort of thing. And everything I write is in Scrivener. And the reason for that is because Scrivener is an enormously versatile application, for one thing. I love it because it allows me to write in a non-linear fashion and then export in a linear document. But even if you write as a linear person, you know, even if your style of writing is to start at the beginning and right through to the end, the other thing Scrivener allows you to do is to keep all your notes and research in the same project and visible at the same time,
Right,
and
right.
locatable, easily locatable within the same project as your draft. And that to me is enormously valuable because, again, it's one less thing I have to think about.
And
I
you
just
don't have
know
to
that it's all
search for
there.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just there.
Yeah, I agree. I love it.
The other really, really important tool to me, even though it's not, you know, sort of anything special, is the calendar. I use I go into this, as you know, the very first thing
Yes.
in the book is about using your calendar, because to me it's so important. Obviously I use my calendar to sort of control my deadlines and go, okay, for this week I'm going to work on this project and next week I'll work on that project. But I also just use it all the time to make appointments and reminders for myself about time specific things that I have to do.
Speaking of that, Victoria has a question that pertains to that. She said she's astonished at the amount of time that PR and answering bloggers and interviews seems to take. And how do you split your time from this PR stuff to when you have to do some writing?
I mean, I saw that question, and yeah, Victoria, that is tough because you will be expected to do so much extra work, essentially. Writing these little 500-word articles for websites and that sort of thing to promote your book. And I was a bit shocked at how much I was expected to do as well. It's unfortunately that never really goes away. Well, I say never. I suppose if you reach the level of somebody like Ian Rankin, he's probably not being asked to write 500-word articles for websites. But for most of us, it never really goes away. It's just, it becomes part of the life. Yeah, sorry to horrify you like that. But in terms of controlling the schedule for it, again, that's where I use my calendar. If I have, this happened actually with the Organised Writer, I've written a lot of those short articles and done Q&As and stuff for websites and magazines about this book. And as each one comes in, I make sure that I get a firm deadline from them. If it's a Q&A, I make sure that I get the questions from them as quickly as possible. And then I will block out that time in my calendar and say, okay, look, and again, some of this relies on experience, admittedly. I can look at a Q&A and go, okay, that's probably going to take me an hour to write the answers to that. Or I can say, okay, this website needs a 500-word article about this. That's probably going to take me half a day to write. And I can block that time out and say, this is when I'm going to do it, so that I'm in time for their deadline. And then if another one comes in and I just can't fit it in, I'll know, because I can look at my calendar and it will tell me You can't do that, you know. And this is, again, this is the value of saying no. That was one of those 7 Farson principles. Having the confidence to just, when that happens, to turn around to somebody and say, actually, I can't fit that in. If we can do it next week, sure, wonderful, but I cannot do it for you this week or on this day because I'm already doing so many other things for other people. And what you'll find is 99% of the time when you say that, people will say, oh, okay, no, that's fine. We'll do it next week instead. You know, they're not going to turn around and say, well, in that case, we don't want it. But there is a fear that they will. And I understand that fear, especially with yourself being a debut author as well. I absolutely understand that fear that if you don't grasp it and take advantage of it immediately, it will slip away. And they'll go, oh, well, in that case, you know, forget you. We don't want it anymore. That won't happen. I mean, yeah, maybe, like I say, 1 in 100, maybe. But most of the time, that absolutely will not happen, especially if you are upfront and say, and the reason being, I can't do this for you because I'm doing a dozen things for other places that also have the same deadline. I'm really sorry. Can we just push this back 5 days? Almost everyone will say, yeah, sure.
So let me turn this over now to Luke, who wants to talk to you a little bit about some of your other work and had some questions for you.
I did. I'm conscious of time though. So I'm thinking maybe in order to fit in the readings and stuff, maybe we won't go too deep into some of the questions I had, but I suppose
I'll try and be quick. I know I can ramble a bit, so I'll try and give shorter answers.
That's all right. So I guess, cause there was what I want to, okay, I gotta focus now. Cause I'm like looking at all these questions that I had. Okay, let's chat about Atomic Blonde because we had a brief email exchange about that because I made you saw one of the questions earlier and you know, because I compared it, I called it Bond-esque, and that was a little bit amusing. So my first question about that, because I recently rewatched it, and I wanted to know what your thoughts were in terms of seeing your work be adapted, and what that process was like for you from kind of writing this graphic novel to then its adaptation, and what that process was like.
Well, I think everybody's experience in that position is different, and mine certainly was different to, I know, you know, many other authors who get adapted, in that I was quite involved. I was a co-producer on the film. So I saw, you know, every draft of the screenplay and was giving notes. I was consulted on casting. I went and spent some time on set. I saw and gave notes on the first rough cut, the first director's rough cut of the movie as well, you know, before all the effects were done, before ADR had been done and all that sort of stuff, which is a lot more involved than many authors get to be. Yeah. At the same time, I don't want to build myself up too much. I wasn't there every single day on set like the sort of the real producers. But just being that involved is much more than many authors get when their work is adapted. I realize that. And that did make the process slightly unusual. Because I have written adaptations myself, where I've turned prose into graphic novels, and I have also written screenplays adapting, you know, books to film. I understand the process, and I know that changes must always be made. So I'm not precious about it. What I regularly said to David, the director, and Charlize was, I've already written the best graphic novel I can. Now it's up to you to make the best movie you can. And if that means you have to change some things around, go for it. You know, don't sort of worry about, because when I first got to set, people were like, oh, we've changed this, I hope you don't mind. And I was like, it's fine. I've read the screenplay. I know what you're going to do. You know, this isn't a great surprise to me. So yeah, I was absolutely fine with the changes and the differences. And honestly, there are some parts of the movie where I look at it and I think, I could have done that in the graphic novel, you know, and maybe it would have been better. But, you know, that happens. The reason I was a bit sort of surprised when you described it as Bond-esque is because the graphic novel to me feels much more in the vein of Jean le Carré. And that's what I was trying to do. Was I was trying to,
Yes.
because to the best of my knowledge, nobody else has really done a le Carré style spies in graphic novel form. There are some great spy comic series and graphic novels out there, but none of them are really le Carré-esque.
Yes.
And I'm a huge le Carré fan. Whereas the movie Atomic Blonde is obviously much more Bondian. With the big action sequences and the fact that everybody knows who she is as soon as she lands, and she's not really a secret agent at all, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that's why I was a little surprised. That's all. Yeah,
I think for me, the what triggered that response in my mind was I'd recently just finished watching From Russia with Love, and
which is my favorite Bond movie.
Same, and I kind of had that kind of vibe, but I did, and I kind of regretted not putting it in the initial email when I sent it to you, but I did get the le Carré vibe as well, because I did get that Tinker Tailor spy who came in from the cold kind of atmosphere from the graphic novel, which when I watched and rewatched the film, it's much more it's much more film Bond, where it's kind of big and grand and in the right ways, probably over the top, where as a Bond film would be, whereas the Bond books, in my opinion, are a little bit more subdued compared to the films. So that's what interested me was that kind of process of seeing this kind of, and that's really what I was coming from, that kind of toned down Bond-esque stroke le Carré vibe versus what the film ended up being, which was very, in your face, John Wick kind of action romp, and what that process was like.
Speaking to adaptations, Matthew Ogborn has just posted in the chat, said Atomic Blonde was great fun. Thank you, Matthew.
Yes.
And he says the pacing was spot on and the neon-drenched action set piece is superb. And this is what I mean about adaptation, because those neon-drenched action set pieces are not in the graphic novel.
They're not.
The graphic novel is black and white.
Yeah.
It has approximately 4 pages in the entire book of action scenes. She pulls a gun, I think, 3 times and only fires it once in the entire graphic novel. Like I said, it's much more le Carré than Fleming.
Yeah.
But if you had tried to make that as a film, it would have been quite dull, to be honest. And I just don't think it would have been as good. And Dave Leitch, the director, his genius was coming in and saying, okay, we can't make a traditional noir. You can't do a black and white noir anymore.
Yeah.
But this is set in the 80s. Could you give it that 80s neon vibe, drench it and saturate it in color, and still be noir? Can you make it, by going completely to the opposite end of the spectrum? Instead of monochrome, you now have completely saturated over the top colors.
Yeah.
Would that still work as a noir? And of course the answer is yes. That was entirely his idea. And without that, I'm not sure the film would have worked. It certainly would have been a very different film. So all credit for that goes to him. And like I say, that was one area of the adaptation, which as soon as the idea was explained to me, I got it. And I was like, oh yes, actually, yes, this is brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. I loved the look of it. I loved that heavy saturated neon look. It was great and was such a stark contrast from the book. But my other question about the graphic novel was what inspired the black and whiteness? Was that purely because of the noir le Carré stuff?
Yeah, no, that was absolutely, it was, I always wanted it to be a stark black and white art style, which is one of the reasons why I went to my friend Sam Hart to draw the book. Sam and I are old friends, and I knew that that's his style. He's very good at that. But yeah, I always wanted it to have that feel because I wanted it to feel like a Cold War noir. Or at least I wanted it to feel like a Cold War noir to people of my age who remember watching Cold War noirs. I mean, bearing in mind, obviously, the book was published in 2012, so I realized that it's kind of, aimed at perhaps an older generation. But that was absolutely a deliberate choice for that reason, yes.
Yeah. Are you, because there was you've done a prequel to the book. Are there any plans for future sequels?
I actually have made a start on the 3rd book, which is, for people who don't know, the prequel doesn't actually feature the character that Charlize plays in the movie. The 2nd book was already written before the movie came out, published, in fact, before the movie came out. the third book does feature her character again and explains, I don't want to be too spoilerific here, so I'll just say it explains how she finds herself in the situation in which she finds herself in the first book. So it's another prequel, going back even further.
Fascinating.
And like I say, I have made a start on that.
Nice.
I'm not too far into it because I hit a few roadblocks and I have a few other things on my plate, but it's on my mind, absolutely.
Nice. Cool. I'm conscious of time, so I think those are all the questions I'm going to run with on this particular occasion. So yes, we'll stop there. But I think this was really cool. So we have 3 reads this evening. The first one is by Victoria Dowd. So Victoria is a debut crime writer, and her novel is called The Smart Woman's Guide to Murder. It's a pretty good title. It's the first in a series of crime novels, which are classic whodunits, updated with dark humor. Her book is a finalist in the People's Book Prize, which anyone can vote in. I'm getting all turned around because there's a typo thing. Where we are, People's Book Prize, which anyone can vote in, and her second novel will be out in February. So there we go. So Victoria, take it away.
Mother turned to me. "You'll starve," she nodded, with her usual hangman's compassion. Mother doesn't do maternal. In her faux country clothes, the polish of London still smeared all over them, Mirabelle looked every inch the wife of a banker. It would be too crude to put in print my shortening for wife of banker, but I'm sure you're with me. Why Mother had chosen to befriend such an inferior woman was a marvel to everyone. They didn't seem to like each other, even when they were together. But they'd been friends for so long, they'd forgotten why. As we entered the vast hall of amber-greased towers, our footsteps echoed on the dark stone. An elaborate staircase rose up, snaked round, and drifted away into a cavernous roof. The long picture windows seemed to be impervious to light, with only a faded glimpse of day allowed to seep through the heavy stained glass. Grim colours spread a bruised light over everything. It cast a quiet, ecclesiastical shadow, as if it had been designed by someone who had many things to hide. Thick veils of dust sifted through the still air, as though the house was slowly disintegrating into powder. Aged wood panelling and heavy varnished frames slowly crumbled, leaving a lingering dry tinder scent that permeated everything. This house was the kind of monolith the rampantly wealthy Victorians created as a mausoleum to live in. It was an unnerving old house, and it wasn't too much of a leap to imagine someone stuffing their mother and sitting them in the window. I looked over at Mother. It was a tempting thought. "We've got the run of the place," said Mirabelle. On cue, footsteps fell methodically above our heads, and a door slammed in one of the myriad vaults above. "Oh, except for the ghost," she laughed extravagantly. We didn't. "It's the housekeeper. Deathly old bat didn't know where the wine was." The house had been Mirabelle's idea, but of course Mother had booked and paid for it. A secluded mansion let for only a week every year by its owners, a sort of Airbnb brigadoon. A chance to get away from it all and presumably do some serious book club work, whatever that might entail. Generally, their book club involved arguing about which book to choose, hence Gone Girl 3 times. There would then follow a series of increasingly unpleasant emails about timings, venue, and rather more personal matters, an elaborate meal at someone's house with secret outside caterers, the house selected generally being the most recent one to have had a new kitchen, basement, spiral wine cellar, dungeon installed. There'd be a frail discussion of the book, which no one had finished, started, or bought, unless it was Gone Girl, crescendoing in an onslaught of intrigue and opinions, focusing on various mutual acquaintances, all fueled by copious amounts of Prosecco. If you're a member of a book club, I'm sure you'll be painfully familiar with this, but this house, with its lavish history of family misdemeanours and foul play, had yet to experience anything to measure up to the hysteria of a book club session at full throttle. Thank you.
done. I love the hangman's compassion. Really good. Love that.
I loved Airbnb Brigadoon.
Me too. And I was going to say that. So, but Bonnie put that in the chat. Yeah, that's such a great line. Love that.
Thank you.
That's true. I love that, and I loved the arguing about the constant arguing about reading Gone Girl.
Yeah.
That just feels so real.
Yeah, it is painfully real. If people are in a book club, there's been a...
I was going to ask how much of that was autobiographical.
little bit. It's quite difficult because I've sort of said to mates and people I know, you must buy it, go out, buy it. And then I get texts saying, Booze Club? Did we not call our book club Booze Club? Yes, no.
That's great. That was fun.
Thank
So
you.
the Smart Woman's Guide to Murder, that's out now, right? Correct?
It is.
There we go. Look at that
The
cover.
cover. Yeah.
Great cover.
Fabulous.
And your next one is out in February.
That's right, yeah. And
Good.
it's the same people, and it's the Smart Woman's Guide to Survival. Those people who survive this book decide they're not
sweet.
very good at surviving. So they go on a kind of Bear Grylls style trip to a Hebridean island, and it kind of goes a bit wrong. And people get murdered. Lots of people get murdered.
I mean, as groups and book clubs go, that sounds like a very exciting group
Yeah.
to be
And
in.
a lot of them are related as well. So there's kind of, yeah. It's not good for my own mother to read the words "mother doesn't do maternals."
No, I like that. I like that. Does anyone else have any other comments on Victoria's read before we move on?
Very, very fluent too, Victoria. You've done it a few times.
Do you know, I have now because I joined a really lovely writers. That's the only good thing that I've done really, is join a good writers association, and they do a little coffee time thing every Thursday
cool.
morning, and it's just a really, really small thing, and I was super nervous and I didn't really know how to work Facebook Live and all that sort of thing, but nobody really watches it, so
Listen, yeah.
I've done that too, yeah.
I'm talking to myself in my study, and then it's there, and you can put it on Facebook and get like people to watch it afterwards and stuff like that. But yeah, it's got me over the nerves quite a lot.
Yeah. And just so because I know that I massively tripped over what I was trying to say earlier. So this book is a finalist in the People's Book Prize.
Yeah.
Which all of us can currently go and vote for, should we wish to go and vote
Can you
for.
put the link in the chat? Put the link in the chat.
I don't have it, but Victoria, if you...
I'm sure I can find it.
Victoria, if you could find it and put it in the chat, we'll all go vote for you.
Thank you very much. Thank
We
you.
can Google it.
Yes. Yes, that was great. Sorry, I completely botched that up when I was trying to say that earlier.
We're all judging you, Luke.
I know. I'm gonna blame the copious amounts of Johnny Walker that I've been having since we started.
Hope so.
Cool. So we're gonna move on to Tony, which Bonnie, you are going to introduce, I believe.
Yes. Tony will be reading from his latest novel, The Fountain in the Forest, published by, is it Faber and Faber? Is that how you pronounce it? Tony was a writer in residence at the Science Museum. I would like to know what that is.
Oh, yes.
And is the author of 5 previous novels, including Foxy T, also Faber, 1 nonfiction title, Another Fool in the Balkans, and numerous short stories. Tony White would like to acknowledge the support of the Arts Council England through the Arts Council Emergency Response Fund for Individuals.
Yeah, definitely.
Take it away, Tony.
Okay, I'm just going to read I've done a 3-minute edit of a chunk of chapter 2, and I'm just going to go straight in, and that will give you some idea, and it will introduce you to Detective Sergeant Rex King. Okay, here we go. Right now, though, today, Rex King had other things on his mind, and top of the list was coffee. Having got home after midnight and wound down for longer than he had planned, Rex had awoken with a hangover that was roughly commensurate, emphasis on rough, with the bottle of industrial Australian Shiraz he had finished at 1:30 in the morning. He'd just about had time for a shit and a shower, but not enough to load up the stovetop pot and make his usual espresso. There were plenty of cafes and restaurants to choose from around here, but Rex liked to put his money, such as it was, the way of local businesses who paid their taxes, rather than filling the non-dom coffers of the more ubiquitous chains that didn't. He wasn't an unreconstructed food philistine like some of his colleagues, but given the choice, Rex would go for a good fillet steak and chips over confit of onglet on a salad of wild hedge mustard every time. For even simpler fare, bacon sandwich simple, Sid's was hard to beat. It opened early too. Sitting outside with the Guardian on the table in front of him, folded up and unread, crossword not even started, and his coffee and a bacon sandwich on white toast on the way, there was plenty to think about. 3 conflicting narratives that would be competing for his attention in the coming days, if not weeks and months. Firstly, there was his old friend Terry Hobbs, who was suddenly, astonishingly, front runner to be the lead suspect in a murder investigation. Then there was the news of the safety in custody inspection. Now, the cherry on the cake. Tennyson was about to be dumped in the public domain all over again. The first of these was puzzling, but Rex had been loudly relieved when it became apparent that at least it wasn't Hobbs's body that they'd found the previous day. The missing friend still hadn't returned Rex's call, but knowing Terry as he did, Rex had told Eddie that he was as confident as a bent bookie at Newmarket, that Hobbs couldn't have done it, that he'd be willing to bet a year's salary that there'd be no forensic evidence, not a single fingerprint to link Tell to whoever it was that had been killed in the Royal Palace Theatre paint frame. The second, Rex was less worried about the outcome of any inspection than about the rigors and the burden of the SIC itself. Like he didn't already have enough to do without having to accommodate a bunch of apparatchiks with clipboards crawling all over everything. He knew that he had kept a tight ship on SD, so it was just a matter of putting his head down and submitting to the forthcoming process, speaking when spoken to, framing every response within the relevant regulation and not obstructing them in any way. Easier said than done, but not impossible. That just left Tennyson. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Very good.
I can have a glass of wine now. I've finished work for the day.
Yeah, if I can just make an observation here.
Hi, Barbara.
Talking about policing there, I used to work for the NHS. And honestly, you know, it's so familiar.
One big bureaucracy is much like another.
Oh, absolutely. The inspections, the endless inspections, and how it drives you literally to drink.
Yes,
I'll just
drink
say
to that.
I'll just say I have read The Fountain in the Forest, and it is excellent. Yeah, I'll be honest, Tony, I wasn't sure whether I'd enjoy it or not because you're much more literary than my normal tastes. But I thoroughly did. It is both literary and a great mystery.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Anthony. I appreciate that.
It is possible to be literary and exciting at the same time.
It is.
It's very hard, but it can be done.
Will self, yes, it is.
No, I like that. Go on.
Someone was asking about the Science Museum
Yes.
and what that involved. It was, I mean, it's one of those things that and Victoria, you'll find this. Once your book is out there, people will find it, and you know, you never know who in 5 years' time is going to say, "I love this book. Will you do this thing for me?" And someone at the Science Museum had got in touch because they'd enjoyed my novel Foxy Tea, and so they said, "Come and have a chat," and they suggested that or they asked me what if they created this sort of residency, what I would do with it. And so I said, well, I'd love a backstage pass, access all areas for one thing. and to do some of my own free research, you know, with no aim in mind. And I suggested that I'd write one short story and I'd license it to them as long as they published it and gave it away for free, in as nice a way as possible. And then I asked if they would pay for a sort of open application writing workshops. We could do a sort of 2 or 3 writing workshops.
Oh, lovely.
Writing short stories that would be free to the user and would lead to publication for those writers, for the participants as well.
That's lovely, yeah.
And so
Brilliant.
once we'd agreed those things, I just sort of wandered around flashing my pass, you know. It was great.
Wonderful.
And going to the museum when it was completely empty, being there at midnight, you know, setting up an exhibition and things like that. The unexpected thing was that the short story that I wrote and kind of licensed to them for free became the opening chapter of a novel. So when the novel was finished, maybe sort of 4 or 5 years later, they said, well, since we had a kind of a stake in this novel being written, why don't we publish it? You know, let's do something really interesting. So I ended up sort of having an attachment that went on for quite a long time, which was incredible, just great to have, to be able to kind of drop a novel into that kind of space where 30,000 people are kind of blasting through it every day, and they see, you know, the opportunity to read something, to, you know, and to take away a book. It was a great experience, and I learned a lot from the producers and the people who make things happen there. They're such wizards, you know, amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. Cool.
Is that the first, sorry, is that the first fiction that they published?
It's the first, it was the first novel they'd ever published, yeah, for sure. I think the short story that they did first with me may have been the first piece of fiction that they'd published. But what they reminded me that the museum used to be a publishing house when it was first launched in 1908 or whenever it was. They had their own imprint, and they had an imprint which we revived called A Science Museum Booklet, and that was the actual name of the imprint, which they kept going for little monographs and books on diesel trains and things like that until the 70s. But they discontinued it because now all of their publishing is licensed out. But yeah,
Fantastic.
Fascinating.
Brilliant.
Very cool. Anyone else have any other comments before we move on to the final reader?
I just want to say I love the character detail about the Guardian. I've run a writers group, and I was talking about character detail and building on details today, and I hadn't thought about newspapers, and that's a really good one.
Thank
so
you.
much about him, doesn't it?
Well, the Guardian plays a bigger part in the novel than, but I won't say how.
Okay, spoilers. Spoiler alert. Really cool.
Wonderful. Right, so our third and final reader of the night is Barbara Nadel. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly. So Barbara is the author of the Inspector Ickman mystery set in Turkey, as well as the Hackman Arnold crime novel set in East London. In 2005, she won the CWA Silver Dagger for her Ickman book, Deadly Web. And the Ickman series has been optioned for TV by Viacom/Miramax and will go into production in 2021. That's pretty darn cool. She has a degree in psychology and worked in institutions for mentally disordered offenders before becoming a full-time author. She lives in Essex with her husband and is also a slave to 2 cats, as we have met one of them at least.
Yeah.
And this evening she'll be reading from her latest Ickman book called Blood Business, which is a pretty cool title. So take it away.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay. I'll just to explain a bit. The district where this happens is a very poor part of Istanbul, called Talabasha. And also there's reference here to a character called Marlborough, who is not actually a living cigarette. He is in fact a cat that is owned by Inspector Ickman. Okay. Ickman was still known by some in Talabasha, even though all the drug dealers and bonsai casualties were still in their beds. Early mornings didn't put off Rifat Sansmaz, the owner of Ickman's favourite place to drink when depressed. He hadn't walked past the bar, let alone entered it for nearly 2 years. But even from the outside, it still reeked of raka, piss, cigarettes and cannabis. He was going to just carry on towards his destination when Rifat came running out and grabbed his arm. "Oh, Chetin Bey, it's so good to see you." Rifat hugged him. "I heard you retired," he said. "I couldn't believe it. But when you didn't come by, I thought, oh, then that must be true. How could they do such a thing? How could they push you out?" Retirement was my choice, Rifat Bey," Ickman said. "Really?" "Yes." "Do you want a drink?" "No charge." Rather stupidly, he thought later, Ickman said, "It's 9 a.m. Rifat threw his grubby arms wide. "All the more reason to put a gloss on what will be a long day." It was almost a good idea. If Ickman hadn't been going to a basement flat in Emin Jami Sokak, he might have allowed himself an early morning rucker, but he refused. As he got closer to his destination, he noticed that the washing lines strung across the streets were increasing in number. There were more homes in this part of the district, another marker being the hordes of kids in the unmade streets, playing football, dancing, or taunting the old junk man who made his way slowly along the middle of the road, dragging his cart. Frazzled-looking cats with ears that appeared to be made of lace scampered into corners behind abandoned bags of rubbish, and in one case the skeleton of an old sewing machine. Ickman wondered vaguely whether these feral flea bags could take on his own dear Marlborough. He decided that in spite of Marlborough being king of the Sultan Ahmed streets, these wall-eyed monsters would tear him apart. Eventually, he stopped in front of a tall, thin house that he could see had once been pink. A number was scrawled on the wall, which corresponded with the one on his notepad. As usual in this part of the city, the front door was up a small flight of steps and was open. He went inside. Unsurprisingly, the place smelt of damp. Jumhur Polat lived in the basement, and so he walked towards a flight of stairs that led downwards. As he got closer, he groped for a light switch on the wall, probably one of those timed ones that switched off automatically just before you reached a destination, but there wasn't even that. A deep, dark well of blackness loomed before him as he descended. Ickman struggled to keep a hold on the rickety banister to his right. If he fell into this abyss, who knew where he'd end up? And he'd probably break every bone in his body. As he lowered one foot onto the step below, he felt something squishy touch the bottom of his shoe. A discarded piece of food or a dead rat? It didn't bear thinking about. His body went into shock and began to tremble. He was almost unwittingly at the bottom of the stairs when suddenly he heard a click and light flooded over him. A door not a metre away opened, and he saw a tall, thin figure silhouetted against the light. So that's Ickman going to meet a man who's actually a political dissident. So it's quite a dodgy thing to be doing.
Can't leave it there.
The perfect place to leave it. The perfect place.
Wonderful, Barbara.
One must go buy the book to find out what happens next.
You must. And was it a rat or was it a piece of bread?
What was that? I guess we won't know until we read, so don't tell us. Don't tell us. So I'm curious, what inspired you to write this story to write this detective series and place it where you place it and things like that? What was your inspiration for that?
Well, the original inspiration was because there wasn't anything. I mean, I've written 23 of these books now.
Wow.
And when I started, there was nothing in Turkey.
Wow.
And it's a place it's a city I know really well. So I couldn't understand it. You know, it was like Eric Ambler, and then there was me.
Sorry, Victoria's face when you said you'd written 23 was just utter bafflement, and then Anthony.
Believe me, working in my previous job, in my previous incarnation, I mean, I worked the two jobs for a while. I worked writing, and I worked in a institution for mentally disordered offenders.
Yeah.
A medium secure unit, and that was harder. The books came partly out of that.
Wow. Yeah.
Because that is a very imperfect world.
Yeah.
You know, we have people used to come to us, they'd committed crimes. They often didn't know they'd committed crimes. Their victims, if they survived, never got any closure because the offender didn't know what had happened. So it started out as a way of me enjoying my city, but also me sort of working out the irrationalities of my job. Yeah.
That's a very interesting perspective, the idea that the offender doesn't know what they've done as a crime.
Oh, no.
That's fascinating.
Oh, I could tell you about people who live in supercomputers in their mind, who run the world. I mean, I've known a couple of them, several Jesuses.
There's always a couple of Jesuses out there.
Oh, yes.